Ready? The recording? Are we live? What's going on, guys? It's Ben, Poor Boys Diesel here. Today we have a 2006 Chevrolet 2500 HD. This came in for a post-purchase inspection. Customer would like a full, thorough inspection done on it before he moves forward with the performance build we're about to do. There is a comment on here about he just replaced the serpentine belt, and there's a ticking sound from the belt pulley suspected. So we'll be taking a look at that also. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so first things first, what I always start with on these inspections is dashboard indicator lights. This is basically meaning any warning lights, messages, indicators on the cluster you want to documentate. Snap a quick picture of it. And I also like to grab my Snap-on scanner and run a code scan across it. To do that, it's got a cord. You plug it in an OBD2 port. It'll bring up year, make, model of vehicle, engine size, and the VIN. Good snap of that. When that's all verified that it's correct, then hit OK. First thing pops up is a code scan. That'll run across all modules in the truck and look for any kind of error code and or message. Sometimes it could take 30 seconds, sometimes it takes 5 minutes. Depends on the vehicle. Just got to be patient sometimes. And now we got the code scan done. Scanner's doing what it's done doing. We can go through each module it came across. You got the ECM here, the TCM, ABS module. As you can see, there's no current codes for ABS, but there are history codes. Left front wheel speed sensor. Given there's no ABS warning light on the cluster, probably not going to worry about it. Same with these airbag codes, history codes. But we will give the customer the option to dig into it further if they would like. But since there is no warning lights on the dash, I assume they're not going to want to do that. But nonetheless, we're going to snap a couple pictures of the history codes in here just so the customer knows about them. And this inspection will get sent to the customer directly. So from here, what I like to do is I like to leave the truck running. I'll hop out and I will check the transmission fluid since you need the vehicle running to check that. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, truck's running, ready to check trans fluid. Fluid dipsticks typically in the back of the engine bay. You want to make sure, depending on the vehicle, you check it in park or neutral. Depends on which vehicle it is. Most of the time, it'll tell you on the stick to check it in park. I don't know if you can see that, but anyway, just want to make sure it's running either way. Pull it out, wipe it off, re-stick it, re-pull it. You can see here, it's in the hash marks. Fluid looks semi-clean. Give it a whiff. Make sure it doesn't smell burnt. It smells like trans fluid. We're going to go ahead and take a picture of this. And that will get sent to the customer as well. All right, next on our list of the inspection is our batteries. Typically, just want to look at them, make sure they're not swelled up, they're not sweating. Look at the terminals, the lugs, make sure they're not corroded, loose, damaged, any of that nonsense. Typical diesel has 2 batteries in the engine bay, or driver's side, one on the passenger side. And make sure you look at all of them. Battery also includes alternator. Make sure the alternator connections are not corroded or damaged. Make sure the alternator is not damaged itself. Everything looks good. Snap a couple pictures. Let the customer know we actually care and take a look at it. And we're going to move on to the next list item, and that would be the air filter. Air filter is very important, especially here in the desert. This one has an Air Raid aftermarket filter. Makes it very easy to inspect. Looks fairly new, looks pretty clean. Snap a picture of it, send it to the customer. Next up is a cabin filter. Cabin filters typically didn't start coming into these trucks until Chevy specifically, I believe it's 2017. So obviously it's an 06, it's not going to have one. We're going to hit non-applicable. Next up is engine oil. Engine oil doesn't only pertain to oil level. You obviously want to check it, but it also pertains to oil leaks. Let's see, it's right on the money. Go ahead and snap a picture of it. And then we'll continue to look for oil leaks. Engine oil leaks can obviously be anywhere in the engine bay or underneath. You just want to make sure you glance over all the valve cover gaskets, rocker boxes, look inside the valley, make sure the injection pump O-ring is not leaking. Chevys are a little difficult to see, but the turbo drain also leaks once in a while, so you want to make sure you look at that. All looks good. We'll just move on to the next item here. Next item on the list, brake fluid. Brake fluid also not only pertains to level, but you want to make sure you're looking for leaks. Obviously, if you have a brake fluid leak, that's bad news bears. And get that fixed as soon as possible. Typically won't let a truck leave until it is fixed, just due to safety reasons. If all looks good, snap a picture, move on. So we got power steering fluid. Typically this is checked running also, however, it is close when it is not running too. As you can see, it's good at the full mark. The fluid looks semi-clean. I'm not going to worry too much about it. Want to make sure you look for leaks on all the power steering lines. That includes your hydro boost up here. Everything looks kosher. So we will move on to the next. Engine coolant's way over here on the other side. 9 times out of 10, the reservoir will be clear so you can see it easily. This one you can see levels right on the money. I'll snap a picture of that. Send it to the customer. Next up, we got radiator and hoses. This pertains to not only engine radiator, it also pertains to the intercooler, condenser, pretty much your whole cooling stack. Then you got your hoses, which are your upper, your lower, and your heater hoses. Again, you just want to look for leaks, look for any kind of damage to the cooling stack. It's kind of hard to see the radiator due to all this trim pieces up here, but there's a good opening on the front. You could take a look at the condenser, intercooler, make sure there's no dirt and debris built up that will cause cooling issues. As you can see down here, there's a little bit of buildup on the bottom side of that intercooler, aka charge air cooler. We're going to go ahead and take a picture of that and notate it. We're going to recommend a cooling stack cleaning, which typically involves blowing out the cooling stack with air, and then water, and then air again. Try to get as much dirt and debris out of there as you can. Once that's notated, move on. Last thing we have to look at up here in the meantime is drive belts. Customer stated they already replaced this belt. Not sure how long ago. Looks like there is taking a little bit of damage already. So we're going to go ahead and take a picture of that, notate it. That's pretty much it for the engine bay. There are a couple other things we'll revisit towards later in the inspection. We're going to go ahead and move on to the front and rear tire section of this. We want to look for obviously damage, chunking, cracking, uneven wear, any of that. This one looks like it has fairly new tires on it. I'll take a picture of that. I'll go ahead and take a measurement. I like to go off 30 seconds. It looks like it's at 17-30 seconds. Move on to the rear. Same thing. Look for any kind of damage, uneven wearing. Take a measurement. 12-30 seconds. So the rears are quite a bit lower than the fronts. We're going to go ahead and recommend a tire rotation for this vehicle. Try to even out this tire wear and tread depth situation. Passenger side tires look fine. Driver's side, not so much. Specifically the front tire. You can see here there's a little bit of uneven wearing down the center rib of this tire. We're going to go ahead Snap a quick picture of that for the customer. Take a quick measurement. A little bit lower than passenger side due to the uneven wearing. If I were to guess, it's probably because these tires have not been rotated and or improper inflation. Nonetheless, we're going to make sure the front end's tight on it, rule out any kind of loose steering components, and move on from there. Rear tire looks fine as well. Sure. Quick measurement. And we'll move on to the undercarriage of the truck. We're on the bottom side of the truck now. Obviously, now you're not going to have access to a lift all the time, but it can be easily done on the ground as well. Underneath here, you want to look for any kind of engine oil leak. Typically on the Chevys, they like to leak from the upper oil pan, which this one is doing that exact thing. As you can see, this silver pan here is your upper oil pan, up here is your block, and it is oily right where it meets. So we're going to go ahead and take a picture of that, notate it, and we will recommend a engine oil pan reseal. All right. While you're under here, you want to look at your steering gearbox, make sure there's no power steering leaks there. Eyeball your front differential, make sure there's no leaks there. And then you want to look at the rear side of the engine, make sure there's no leaks, damage. Look for exhaust leaks. We're going to inspect the engine mounts as well. They're a little difficult to see sometimes, especially when there's a lot of stuff in the way. However, these look pretty new, so I'm not going to worry too much about those. Looks like that lower oil pan is leaking as well, which that will be repaired at the same time as the upper oil pan is resealed, if that's what the customer wishes. Everything else looks semi-good. Like there's a bit of dried up coolant here on the bottom side of this bell housing adapter plate area. Snap a picture of that. Appears it is coming from that oil cooler. Notate that. Front suspension while I'm up here. Front and brakes as well. Look like to be in pretty good condition. Let's see what we can measure out at. Most brake calipers will have a inspection hole in the side of them where you could stick a gauge through and or just take a look at them. Looks like it's right at 6 millimeters. So we'll go ahead and snap a picture of that. Let the customer know. Brakes are good. You always want to check both sides. Looks like this side might be a little bit lower in pad thickness. It's more common than you think. Most of the time it's due to a sticking caliper. Either the slide pins are sticking and or the caliper pistons themselves. If I were to guess, it would be the slide pins on this one, considering these are only slightly lower than the passenger side. Take a picture of that and let's move on. Now, whenever you're checking front suspension, you want to check ball joints. Always do a visual inspection. You can see this upper ball joint boot is ripped, damaged, leaking grease. We're going to go ahead and notate that. But not only visual, you want to jack up the front end and check for play as well. All right, when you're inspecting ball joints, not only do you want to look at them visually, but you also want to get the weight off of the front end where the tires are off the ground and check for any kind of play in said ball joints. Especially the higher mileage trucks. Obviously parts don't last forever; they wear out. Typically, if you don't have a pry bar, you can take your hands, top and bottom, work it back and forth. Easier way to do it is with a pry bar. Get underneath, just put pressure up and down like that. Typically, you'll be able to feel it. It's easier if you have a buddy or if you're able to go on the inside, look at it while you do it. These ball joints, despite the torn boot up top, still have plenty of life left in them as there's no play. Just like the brakes, you want to check both sides. No play in those as well. Give the tire a spin. Make sure you don't hear any abnormal noises in the hub, any grinding, clinking. Make sure the CV boots are not ripped. Make sure the CVs are not popping. Same with the other side. Everything seems to be A-okay. All right, you want to look at steering components next. It includes tie rods, pitman arms, gearbox. You're going to need a buddy for this, somebody to shake the steering wheel back and forth in short strokes. When they're doing that, make sure there's no play in your tie rods. Make sure there's no damage to them. These trucks do not have track bars, but the straight axle trucks do. You want to look at those as well. Make sure there's no movement in that gearbox, which that shaft has a little bit of back and forth play. It's going to be extremely hard to capture on video. So we'll go ahead and give the customer a call. Let him know if he wants to come down here and take a look at it. We'll be more than happy to show him that. But everything looks fine other than that. All right, continuing on with the front suspension, we're going to move to the lower control arms. Trucks this old, especially the Chevys and GMCs, the lower control arm bushings like to dry rot and crack on these a lot. This one is no different. We're going to go ahead and snap a picture of that. That one. Both sides. We're going to go ahead and recommend new lower control arm bushings. And then we're going to move on to the rear side of this truck. All right, we're at the rear side of this vehicle now. We're going to be looking at rear suspension. This includes shocks, leaf springs, leaf spring bushings. It also includes your hub seals, includes bump stops. This also includes the rear differential. Make sure you grab the drive shaft, move it up and down. If there's no movement, that's great. If there is movement, not great. Either means you have a U-joint that has play and needs to be replaced, and or the pinion bearing has play, which means you are about due for a rear end rebuild. Everything looks okay other than these leaf spring bushings, just like the lower control arm bushings. They are cracked, dry rotted, damaged. We're going to go ahead and snap a picture of those. Both sides will recommend to the customer replace leaf spring bushings front and rear. And now, just like the front, we have brakes in the rear. Measure them the same way. There's an inspection hole on the caliper. These look like they're in great shape. Here's your inspection hole here. Depending on the wheel and tire setup this vehicle has, sometimes it's harder to view than others. With the deeper offset wheels, it's a lot easier. Go ahead and snap a picture. And just like the front, you want to make sure you check both sides. That side looks great as well. It's going to be about the same thickness as the other side. Yeah, and that about does it for the rear. There's really not much back here to look at. After buying a vehicle, you just want to look over everything you can. Make sure there's no excessive rust. There's no frame damage. You can usually tell when a vehicle's been in an accident and had frame damage. This one looks pretty clean. Luckily, we don't have to deal with a whole lot of rusty trucks out here in the desert. It's missing half of the exhaust. We're going to go ahead and notate that. I'm sure the customer knows about it, but we'll just go ahead and put that in inspection as well. From here, we move towards the middle of the vehicle. The middle of the vehicle, I like to check for U-joint play. Make sure there's no trans mount play. Inspect the trans mount and inspect the transmission pan, transfer case if equipped. A lot of these lifted trucks have the added braces here, and they also have bushings that like to fail. These look pretty new. Make sure the torsion bars are not damaged. They don't look funky. This vehicle is equipped with a fast fuel system. Very common on the Duramaxes. Want to make sure whoever installed it didn't route the fuel lines weird, where they're not kinked or any of that. Same goes for the electrical harness. Looks like they kind of just looped it up and tied it where they could up here. We're gonna go ahead and notate this fast harness. It's kind of just flopping around here. We recommend to the customer that we re-secure it properly. It's not a huge deal, but it is looks a lot better. Prevents something snagging it if you were to run there something over in the road. While we're under here, we want to look at the cab mounts. Those are also a wearable item. Chevys typically aren't as bad as the Fords. The Fords are notorious for cab mounts. These ones look to be in pretty great shape. So we're just going to snap a couple pictures of them. Let the customer know he doesn't have to worry about those anytime soon. We're nearing the end of our inspection here. Pretty much covered just about everything we could. While you're underneath here, you always want to just look at everything that's not typically looked at. Specifically the fuel tank, especially when there's fastest involved. People like to add sumps and or draw straws, and if they're not done properly, it could cause a leak. This one looks like it has something going on here. It's a sticky substance on the side of this thing. Not quite sure what it is. It's definitely not diesel, but we're gonna go ahead and notate that. Really nothing to worry about. It's just let the customer know that it's there. So we pretty much covered everything we have in our inspection here. Notated all the leaks we found, any kind of damaged component, steering component, suspension component, stuff like that. From here, I will take this thing on a test drive, do a road test on it, make sure the alignment doesn't feel off. I'll check HVAC system while I'm doing that. I'll check vehicle operation, make sure it doesn't overheat, make sure the trans is shifting fine, stuff like that. When I get back, I will then check for blow by. If it has any, if not, great. If it does, it's bad news. But we're gonna go ahead and do that. All right, what's going on, guys? It is now the next day after our post-purchase inspection. Due to time constraints, we had to go ahead and move it along. Customer needed his truck back as soon as possible. So, all right, so we're just gonna go over pretty much what we found on this 30-point inspection we got here. First things first, every vehicle that comes to the shop gets an initial inspection. Gets pictures of all around the vehicle, the dash, interior, just to documentate what the truck arrived as. That's more for the office administration. But we're down here. We got our dashboard indicator lights. This is where we got all our codes, warning lights if there is any. In this case, this truck had none. Interior lights are fine, wiper blades, all that good stuff. Let's see, engine oil. Remember from yesterday, the upper oil pan was leaking. That's all documented. Brake fluid's fine. Engine coolant, we found that dried up spot right here on the bell housing. That's most likely coming from the oil cooler. That's documented, letting the customer know. It's not something to completely worry about right now, but it's something to keep an eye on for sure. Probably fix sooner than later before it worsens. We have our belt issue here, front tires, brakes, control arms, front suspension, where we found the ripped boot, worn out bushings, all of that good stuff documented. Basically, this entire inspection will get sent to the customer. It'll be gone over with the customer in person while he's here. If he's not able to be here, it'll be gone over the phone. We go through each step with the customer, make sure they understand what we found wrong with the truck, and then it also gives them the option to either authorize or decline repairs on it. This customer is going to take some time to think about this, considering he just purchased this truck. He's going to get back to us hopefully today, let us know what he wants us to fix on this thing, or if he wants to go ahead and move forward with the performance build and fix some of these things while we're in there. So that's basically it on this 30-point inspection. This is what $215 will get you here at Poor Boys. If you're not able to do it yourself, or if you don't have a lift easily accessible to make it easier on yourself, go ahead and bring it down.